Hi again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Alumni Chats, a weekly podcast featuring alumni from the Department of Broadcasting and Journalism here at Western Illinois University. My name is Buzz Hoon. I'm the host of the podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Brittany Baumann, a 2007 graduate. Can it be 2007? Is that right?
I know, 14 years. Scary.
Wow. Well, thanks for joining me, Brittany. It's so great to see you. Let's talk about, tell everybody where you are, what's going on, and then we'll backtrack.
Sure. So right now I'm at KSTP in Minneapolis, St. Paul. We are the ABC affiliate. We are owned by Hubbard Broadcasting, and I'm a news producer there. Right now I work on our 5 p.m. show. I've worked on just about every show that we have, but currently landed on the 5 p.m. show starting back in May. And I've been there now for almost 6 years. It'll be 6 years the end of September.
And every once in a while, you may see behind you, Mr.
Let me see if I move. There he is. If you hear a dog barking, hopefully he'll sleep through it. We just came back from a walk. So I'm hoping that will be enough to keep him quiet. But every once in a while you'll see him jumping on and off the bed and that sort of thing. So.
Oh, it's awesome. I'm glad that we got to see him.
Me too.
Okay, so let's get started. Now, let's go all the way back because I'm not even sure. Did you come from the Chicago suburbs?
Aurora.
Okay,
Aurora, Illinois is where I grew up. And then I moved to Batavia, actually, where I went to high school after my parents got divorced. So I only lived in Batavia pretty much just long enough to go to high school. So I was there for 5 years. And then from Batavia is where I moved to Western and went to Western Illinois and really haven't lived in Illinois ever since.
So let's go back. And when did you find out that you may have had an interest in broadcasting? Because I think sometimes people know early on that they have a love of writing or they have an interest in and ask a lot of questions. So how did your sort of talents start to bubble up?
I have wanted to be in news since I was 6 years old.
Wow.
I wanted to be a television reporter after watching the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I wanted to be April O'Neil. And I can remember in the first grade, we had to draw like a picture of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I drew a picture of like a person in like, I think she has like a yellow jumpsuit on in the movie. And so that's what I drew. And this is not a story I tell very often, Buzz. My first grade teacher actually told me that I was too shy to be on television.
Wow.
Now I'm not on television. I'm a news producer, but not a word I think that you would use to describe me.
No.
So I've always wanted to be on news for a while. Before I got to Western, I thought I would maybe go into like sports broadcasting because I love sports. But then I realized that you have to work in cities where you don't necessarily like the sports teams. Yeah. And I was like, I'm not like going to go to Detroit and pretend like I'm a Pistons fan. That's not happening. So then I decided that news was probably a better fit for me.
So when you came to WIU, I always like to find out also how somebody gets their first taste of broadcasting. Do you remember what was the first thing you got involved with?
News anchoring. I sent in a tape when I was still in high school. This is also another really funny story that you probably don't even know. So we had a little bit of like a broadcast program at my high school. Our public access channel was run out of our building. And so I had gotten the script and we didn't have teleprompter. So I had written them out like on cue cards, like these huge poster board cards. I'd written the scripts down. And I had like a couple of guys help me and they would like flip through and somebody ran camera and I sent in an audition tape. And I think Sam may have been running that a little bit more at that time. And he just thought I was like a community college student, like transfer student. No one realized until I got to campus and showed up after I had become an anchor that I was a freshman, a first semester, all freshmen. And I remember Sharon just being like, oh, okay, so you have zero writing experience. Well, this is going to be great. So I just jumped right in immediately. And you know what? Not knowing any better is kind of me, I guess. I just kind of like jump right in and see what's going to happen from there. I think you guys have rules in place now to prevent that from ever happening again. But
well,
time, and I took advantage.
Right. I think there's a time and we, I've over the years talked to lots of young people and encouraged them to get involved right away. And it's always sort of based upon people like you that did take advantage of those things, because I think there's for some people over the episodes that we've talked with some of our alums, it's kind of funny how a lot of people just kind of slowly like to ease their way in and see how everybody else was doing and say, oh, I'm a little unclear where my position was. And then there's somebody like Brittany that was like, because I remember one of the first things I said, I needed a sideline reporter for sports because we were doing the games. And you're like, yeah, I can do that.
And you know why I thought that is because Mark Moses had done it. And I remember being in my dorm room, residence hall, watching him on TV one time. We were flipping through or something. And I'm like, wait, Mark does this? And so when you asked me, I was like, well, if Mark can do it, I can do it. Sure. Again, just that naivete, having no idea like how hard it was or what it would take, just being like, oh yeah, sure, why not? But the thing about going back to that anchoring experience, because I'm also smart enough to be like, wow, no, I'm really in over my head. I have no business being here. I worked really hard at it. And the days that I did anchor, so the way it was set up, I don't know how it's done now, but it was like the same producing crew Mondays and Wednesdays. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I think I anchored like Mondays, let's say. So then I would go in every Wednesday, even though I wasn't an anchor and I didn't have a position, and I would hang out with that producing crew, and they would teach me how to run the cameras, how to run the prompter, how to floor direct, how they were building the scripts. At the time, it was in Excel. I mean, we didn't even have a News King program or anything remotely close to that. So they would show me how they timed the shows. And I probably learned more from going in every Wednesday that entire semester and working with those kids. Not that I didn't learn a lot as an anchor too, but just they really took me under their wing and helped me a lot. And they were really great.
Yeah, that total immersion back then, that was something that I think was very beneficial to a lot of our students because obviously many young people, their first impression is, I want to be on air, and not realize all the work that it goes, all the other people that it takes to put on a really good newscast.
Yeah. And it was a lot of fun. They made it a lot of fun for me. And I got to know them really well. And it helped them on Mondays then too, to see like, oh, she's really taking this seriously.
So what are some of the other faculty members and stories? Because I like to hear the stuff I didn't get to hear back when you were a student. What kind of stories do you have of just hanging out with faculty or other students or anything like that?
So many. I'll try to maybe tell more of the appropriate ones.
That's okay.
I have a lot of inappropriate stories that happen outside of the third floor of Sully Hall, but we won't get into that. That's another podcast. That's like a after hours one. But I can remember specifically Denise Hanitka helping me a lot with my writing. I can remember when I did get a chance when she anchored to write for her. Denise can be very intimidating, especially if you don't know her. And she was such a great reporter at the time. And her and Allison were turning amazing stories. And when she would anchor, I was writing a story. And I can remember one time she was like, who wrote this? This is terrible. Who wrote the story? And I was like, I did. And so she was like, okay, well, here, let me help you. And because I owned up to the fact that that it was me, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, help me, and I said that to her, and the fact that she then kind of sat me down and really helped me. She had just finished, I think, her internship in the Quad Cities that summer. And so she just knew more than the rest of us. And she really took the time to help teach me. Brian Tully also really took me under his wing and helped me out throughout that whole probably last maybe 2.5 years. And funny about that, Brian and I actually met outside of Silly Hall. We did not know that we were both broadcasting majors. We had some mutual friends in common. And so we had just kind of run into each other and had become friends. And then I remember seeing him in class one day and I was like, wait, what are you doing here? He's like, I don't know. What are you doing here? We had no idea. And so we've been friends for a very long time too. And I like to tell the story of how I met Mark Moses, who we talked about earlier, because he has a very different take on how this story went. But he's actually the very first person that I ever met on the third floor of Silly Hall. And I was anchoring. I was a freshman anchor, like I mentioned earlier, and I'm like all dressed up in my suit. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'm trying to just like hide and read my scripts because I'm so overwhelmed. It's like week one. I have no idea what I'm doing. And I went into the dog because that's the only place that there were chairs. We didn't have a student lounge or anything like that. So I'm gonna sit there and I'm in my scripts in my suit. And Mark had just finished his radio shift. And he's like, oh, hey, I don't know you. I'm Mark. Because that's Mark, to just like run up to a random person and introduce himself. And he's like, oh, hey, I'm Mark. I like do a bunch of stuff with the radio and that sort of thing. And I'm just like, okay. And he's like, what do you like, a anchor or something? And I'm just like, no, I just like to hang out and read scripts in a suit. Like, what do you think I'm doing? And I just remember being like, who's this guy? But he was so nice to me. And he showed me around the radio station and showed me how to work some of the equipment and really inspired me to, like I said, sideline report, do my own sports talk radio show for a semester, do radio news, and even just kind of dabble in radio that I don't think I would have otherwise. So those are kind of some of the people and memories that stick out to me the most.
Oh, some great people there. And what I appreciated is you've already kind of shared this, the mentoring that was going on from some of the older students, which I always thought was so important in our program. And I remember near the end of your senior year asking you to come back because I still taught that entry level class of I think it was BC 223, the Intro to Radio and Television Production.
Okay, yeah.
And I remember asking people at the end of when they would be seniors, and I thought they were exceptional people. And you came back and spoke to, a group of freshmen you didn't know, but you gave them encouraging words and talked about getting involved and doing some different things. And I think that you also, so you took what how you benefited and you passed that along the way. And try to help other people after, especially when you were when you felt comfortable to do that as a senior.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, again, I didn't know any better. I just kind of thought that's how it worked. People helped me get better. They helped me get to where I was. And it was a lot of fun that way. It's a lot more fun to kind of have, Denise and Brian be like, hey, let's write some stories and let's figure out how to put together a newscast. Let's try a bunch of different stuff. Than it is to sit in a lecture hall or a classroom or, that sort of thing. And that's honestly how you learn how to do television news, I think, is you learn by trying stuff, you learn by doing. And that was such a great opportunity that we got to do that I got to do that at least through all 4 years that I was at Western from the moment I stepped on campus.
And probably something that I remember that you haven't mentioned is as soon as the newscast would be over, and whether you were on the air or you're part of the production crew at any aspect, there was always a breakdown. There would be, let's get into the control room and talk about what just happened. And there would be Sam and Sharon and Roger, and those people would, okay, let you guys say it first, because if you don't say it, we're going to say it for you. There would always be, I think, and for new people, they would be like, oh man, as you said, who wrote this story? How did this happen? Be a lot of, let's break this down. What went wrong? But I think that was constructive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's like kind of how it is in the real world. And that's how I think I just am as a person. I have conversations with my current news director a lot about how he's like, when I come out of the booth, he's like, I'm not going to ask you how the show went right now, because I know that like right now, it's all the things that maybe didn't go right that are in your head, because he just knows me, that's how I am. he's like, I'll ask you in 10 minutes when you have forgotten some of those little things. And then we can talk about, kind of what went right. Because for me, the bar is always higher than whatever I was at. And I think for me, that just started at Western, always trying to get better.
So let's talk about some other things. You in our sort of preparation, you talked about you were in were you in Bayless?
Yes,
Fifth
Bay
Ward?
5. Yeah.
Okay,
Fifth Ward, Bay 5 girls.
So what was, talk a little bit about the friends that you made during that period of time.
Yeah, they're still my friends today,
Nice.
actually. So I was lucky enough to have just a great group of girls who were kind of my sounding board away from broadcasting. And I think that was super helpful, especially the first couple of years, because although I had kind of met Brian right away and I had kind of met Mark, but, Denise, I didn't meet until maybe a few years in, that we kind of started to become friends. And some of those other kids that I hung out with wasn't until maybe junior or senior year where I found maybe my broadcast friend group. I had a lot of good mentors, but not people to hang out with. So I had my Bay 5 gals, and now I can remember visiting one when she went to graduate school, and we just we're big White Sox fans, and we go to White Sox games still together. She was just actually up here in Minnesota for her birthday in May, and we went. We were celebrating birthdays and babies being born and that sort of thing together too. So it's really neat to kind of grow up together outside of school.
Yeah, that's nice. So let's tell everybody what happened after you left WIU, because I think your first job was a producer job. Was it the one in Washington? Was that your first opportunity?
Yes. So I worked in 2 different markets in Washington State. So again, I just was like, yeah, I'll move 2,000 miles from home to a place I've never been to. I had never been on an airplane before I flew out there for my interview. And I'll work overnights in a different time zone than I've ever lived in. Sure, why not? So I was a morning show producer for 2 years. It was not a great experience. I'll just put it that way. And then from there, I moved to Spokane, Washington. And I had, I think, maybe 2 or 3 months in between. So I really wanted to work at this one particular station. And I had made it to kind of like top 3, but didn't get the first job. But they said, we might have something opened in a couple months. So I was kind of just in limbo. And I decided, you know what, because I had such a terrible experience the first 2 years out the gate, I decided, maybe I'll go to grad school. So I applied to graduate school at Eastern Washington University and I got in. And then I got the job in Spokane. So I moved to Spokane, and I think probably within the first 6 months of working there, I enrolled in graduate school. And so then I was working full time and going to graduate school. And then I decided to adopt my second dog, Mister, who's my only dog now. Because again, why not, right? I'm going to grad school, working full time, adopt a second dog. Sure. It did become a little too much. It became a little overwhelming. And again, wasn't a great fit for me personality wise. So I actually left the business for a little bit, for about 18 months, and finished my graduate school out there. And then I moved back home for about 3 months. And that's when I got my job in Milwaukee as a producer. And then it just kind of started clicking again for me. I kind of realized once I was kind of back in the Midwest, a little closer to home, a little bit on a more normal schedule, that this is where I wanted to be. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to do local news. And I think with that time off and then coming back a little bit closer to home, I kind of refound that love of news and storytelling that I had kind of lost along the way.
So how did you get to Minneapolis, St. Paul? Was that a plan? Did you want to stay in the Midwest? Were you looking to move up to a certain level of market? Was it just the breaks happened?
Yeah, that's a good story. I'm trying to think if I have my prop handy here. I don't know that I do. I think it's moved out of my desk drawer. But in 2005, I was a junior, and I printed off a list of the Nielsen television markets. And I had circled Minneapolis, St. Paul. And I had written down the year 2016, and that was my goal. By the time in 2016, I wanted to be in Minneapolis, St. Paul. Maybe it was one too many episodes of Mary Tyler Moore Show growing up, on Nick at Night, or it was just the fact that it was, to me, the largest market in the Midwest. That wasn't Chicago. My dream's just never been to work there. I still have that piece of paper. It's somewhere here. I don't know. I'm trying to think of it. It might even be at work, and I'm not sure. And in 2015, I signed my first contract, September of 2015. So it was always the dream. And again, it got lost along the way, but somehow I found my way back to it.
That's amazing. So did you ever make a second goal? Because is there some place that we can predict that you'll be in another 10 years?
I'm just going to say to be continued on that.
Okay.
You might find out more soon. That's
Okay.
all I can say on that end. So we'll see.
Nice. During your time in Minneapolis, I'm sure you've had your share of some really interesting stories as you even I know that Prince, the death of Prince, Minneapolis native, right?
Yeah, he was in Minnesota. Paisley Park is in Chanhassen, which is like a suburb of the Twin Cities, and that's where he was when he died, actually. So he was flying back. I want to say it was like from Atlanta, and then it was like an emergency stop in Moline, and then Moline back to the Twin Cities, and then it was like the next day or so that he died. And I didn't even know Prince was from Minnesota before that happened. I remember being like, why am I getting a push alert from our station about this? I was working on the morning show at the time. And then quickly learned what a ginormous deal that was for Minnesota. The thing I love about Minnesota and Minnesotans is they care about who's from here. And so anytime a Minnesotan is involved in anything, it's a really big deal for us. And then to have an iconic music legend who was from here, who loved it here, was known to, go out and about on his own within the Twin Cities. He liked to shop in Minneapolis at a record store, downtown, Electric Fetus. And he was just so very connected to the community. And I was kind of learning all of that for the first time. It was new information for me, but it was a very big deal for us here.
So what other kind of important stories have you seen come across your desk during the last few years?
We've had so many. Minnesota has really been, I think, in the national spotlight for a number of reasons, most tragic, some great. I won't go into great detail about a lot of them, but if you guys remember a few years ago, there was a young girl, she was 13, she was kidnapped from her home, and she was missing for, I think it was like 89 days. Her name was Jamie Kloss. That happened just across the border from us in Barron County, Wisconsin, which is interviewing area. And we covered that case from the time, we found out that she was missing and that her parents had been murdered. And it was just a complete stranger, which is just unbelievable. You don't think that sort of thing is going to ever happen, right? That was really scary. And I know that we had done some great reporting on that. We were the first to find out that she had been found through some sources. And one of our fantastic reporters, Beth McDonough, actually called Jamie's grandpa that night before the news had even broken, before we had gotten, Mr.'s going to join me now, official from Barron County officials that she had been found. And to be in the room, to hear her break that great news that she was alive, that she had been found. I still get chills when I think about just that phone call. It was a very emotional night. And then, of course, we've been in the spotlight with the death of George Floyd. Someone recently, actually this morning, someone asked me what it was like covering that. And I said, traumatic. It was traumatic. To watch the place that you live burn, to be looted, to watch that horrible video of a man die in the street, it's traumatic. It's sad. It's something I'll never forget. And it's nothing you're ever prepared for. I mean, as great of an education as I've gotten at Western, and I've gotten in all the stations that I've ever worked for, nothing really quite prepares you for that. And the rest of the country has moved on in a lot of ways. And I don't know that the Twin Cities has. I still think that it impacts a lot of the community here. We had a pharmacy just the other day finally reopen from the rioting. I think there was about 139 pharmacies that were destroyed, and that impacts a lot of people. I mean, people can't get their medicine. Grocery stores are destroyed. Some of them will never come back. Some of them are small businesses. To tell those stories of what was happening continuously was gut-wrenching. To see the devastation that it caused in the community was gut-wrenching. And then we finally kind of got through a lot of that, and then the trial started. I couldn't watch the video again, to be honest with you. It played during opening statements. I had seen it a lot. We had kind of transitioned to using a lot of still photos and blurred images from that day, and to be very, very careful with how we use the video, because we were hearing from a lot of people like, please stop showing it. It's traumatizing. And then to see it again, kind of so far removed. I listened to opening statements, and that was part of my job that day, but I kind of just put my head down and listened because I couldn't watch it. So I think we're still dealing with that. And that's one of those things, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but you have to really love this job. You have to love what you do, and you have to realize that what you're doing is important. Because if you're here to just make a buck, one, you won't. And two, if you're trying to get famous, the chances of that, or just be on TV, it's a lot of hard work. Sometimes it's 12, 15-hour days. Sometimes it's 7 days a week. It's holidays, it's weekends. But what you're doing is you're informing your community, and you're telling them what's going on, and you're putting stories in perspective. And you're on the ground, and you're showing people what's truly happening. And you're also gatekeepers, and you're filtering out information as well for the benefit of other people. And that's important work. And that's why I go to work every day. I kind of told you, it's what I do is not easy. It's often fun. It can be a lot of fun, but it's not easy. It's difficult work, but it's work worth doing.
Yeah. Well, when I think of people like you, and I do think of you, Brittany, when there are things going on, especially when George Floyd was going on, and I think, how are you dealing with, so that you don't become burnout, so you don't become, because dealing with news, it does take a certain personality. And if you personalize it to a point, you get wasted, I think, by the negativity of what can surround it. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's something I am working on every day. I think first and foremost, like I said, if I didn't think what I was doing was important, I would be done. Yeah. I don't think I could continue to do this if I was just looking to make a paycheck and go home. It helps a lot when you have wonderful people that you work with who you really feel like support you and love you and are in it with you. And I have that a lot with the people that I work with. And I'm sure the fact that we went through something fairly traumatizing together and a pandemic together kind of helps with that bond and to support. And I think acknowledging the difficulty helps, talking about it, labeling it. Obviously I'm a firm believer that words are important, labels are important. Those things help, and just kind of trying to take care of yourself a little bit as best you can. I have my dog, Mister, who's sitting on my lap to focus on, which is sometimes to have a good distraction, going for a walk after work and seeing his smiley face helps on bad days. But if you're in the wrong environment, like I was my first 2 markets, I think that's why I burnt out so quickly. Being in a place with people who I genuinely care about and love helps tremendously with those sorts of things.
Well, you also had some good news about Suni Lee.
Yes, she's from St. Paul.
Yeah.
We got to celebrate Suni. We got to talk to her family, who's just, they're amazing. We have a very large Hmong population here in the Twin Cities. So we got to, with Suni Lee Day on Friday, the governor declared that, and so did the mayor of St. Paul. And so it's not all death and destruction. we do get to celebrate every once in a while. We've had a couple of other Olympic athletes. Reagan Smith, the swimmer, she is from Lakeville, and Grace McCallum is from Isanti. I'm sure there are others, but those are the ones that I can think of right now. On the men's gymnastics team, one of the members who made it is also, he was a gopher for a while in the University of Minnesota, Golden Gopher. He's from here as well. We talked to his parents, I think about a month ago or so when he first qualified. So there are good things that happen in Minnesota too. It's not just death and snow.
Sure. You got to take the wins when you can get them. That's right.
Absolutely.
So I'm interested to find out, because it's, as you said, you've got a career now. I think it's a good sized career in TV news. Let's talk about the things that have changed. What has changed in your job, positive or negative?
Technology.
Okay.
I do think back to when I was in school. At least there wasn't everybody with a cell phone and a camera. So like when I said, I could jump in and I could be a news anchor right away. I did have a little bit where I wasn't like super embarrassed that everything I did was going to end up on the internet. Where I feel like that is maybe a thing nowadays. I didn't have to worry about people like filming me all the time or shooting anything or anything like that. So
we know who the TV star is in this.
I know it. I know. He really wants a treat, I think. Okay, I'm going to give him a treat real quick. We'll be right back.
Yeah.
Come on. See, when you work in live television, these things happen sometimes. So technology has changed quite a bit. So not everybody's walking around with a camera in their pocket like they are nowadays, which is great in some regards, because we get a lot of viewer video, a lot of things that we wouldn't necessarily have been able to have access to before. When I was in college, we didn't have Twitter. That kind of became a thing. I think my first market is when I signed up for Twitter. But now we use that as a news tool a lot. Just about every city, every agency has an account, and so they're tweeting out information as opposed to waiting for a big long press release. Sometimes that's how we'll get identifications or just quick updates on different stories we're covering. I didn't know what Zoom was a year ago, so that's right. Never heard of it. Kudos to our KSTP sports department. That was like, when the pandemic hit, was like, guys, put everybody on Zoom. That's what we do. And it was fantastic. And so our content manager sat down and patiently taught me how to use this new technology. I had never used Skype before the pandemic. And then we used it almost every single day. So just a lot of those little things have changed. Technology is sometimes good and sometimes frustrating. It makes me feel old.
Yeah.
With all the technology I have to keep up with.
The other thing that concerns me for all of our alums, but not only our alums, but for anyone working in news, is the attitude I think that a lot of people started to get in the last few years about whether or not, that the fake news, the claiming that people were somehow biased in the production of news. And I think that was so unfair, that what started happening to people in every market
Yeah.
about how they were labeled and viewed.
Yeah. It's been tough. I feel like we've gotten a lot more of that recently. I don't remember this being an issue 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years ago. But I don't want to say constant, but it feels constant. It's probably kind of trickled off recently a little bit. But for a while, it seemed like a lot. We get, and that's a great thing. We want to connect with our viewers. We want to hear from them. But sometimes we just get like heinous emails sent to us with just like telling us all these terrible things, not even really like making a point. If somebody wants to call or email and say, hey, I think your coverage is biased and here's why, and maybe gives us an opportunity to reply, hey, we're all for that. But we literally just will get people who are like, you guys stink, fake news, swear at us and hang up. And we're like, okay, have a great day. What do you say to that? You can't like argue with that. And I guess it's the people who aren't open to learning what it is that I do for a living, who aren't open to even having a conversation with me or anyone that I work with, who just want to send us some terrible email and make us feel really bad about ourselves and threaten us and then walk away. Feels like a slap in the face. It feels like a gut punch when that sort of thing happens. And so as much as technology has helped us engage with viewers in different ways, which can be incredibly helpful, it also, I don't feel like that's an even tilt to the other side when they won't really engage and they just kind of throw stuff and walk away. That's hard.
And I would say, I hope you take this in the right way, you are a seasoned journalist now. And so do you think that this will have any impact on future journalists? Do you think that in a way, some young people are looking at this and saying, that job, it was already tough enough and didn't pay enough, and now people don't appreciate it like they used to. Do you think it might in some way impact the number of people that decide to go into the medium?
I hope not. I really hope not. I think if one thing, maybe if you're watching this at home and you are thinking about going into broadcasting, I deal with it a lot less behind the scenes than a lot of people on air do. Yeah, sometimes I have to answer that phone call, of that person, or I read that email. But I know, especially with a lot of what our female anchors throughout the years have had to deal with, especially with just, you don't need to comment on whether you like someone's blouse. You can just keep that to yourself. You don't have to say that in an email or a phone call or whatever, or a tweet, or, I get a lot less of that. I don't get personally attacked by people. So it's a little easier for me to laugh it off, when someone just sends you some crazy email that's just like, F you. And that's it. That's all it is. You're like, oh, okay, well, great. Good for you, buddy. And you can kind of chuckle about it because it's just so insane that you have to just be like, okay, well, this guy clearly has just a problem. It's not me. So I'm going to move on with my life. So it's a little bit easier from that standpoint. So I would say, there are other options than just being a reporter, than just being an anchor, than just being in front of the camera, and you still have a really important voice, and you're still a journalist, I still write for a living. I still tell really good stories, and I'm involved, top to bottom on what happens in the newscast. And I don't know that a lot of kids know what it is that a producer does or really understands that. I didn't when I got to Western. I didn't really understand it until I took the class. And that's kind of when I was like, oh, well, this feels more me. This is a little bit better fit for me than being a reporter or an anchor. I just didn't know that was a thing when I was, 6 years old and decided I wanted to go into television news.
Well, I've always thought so. Even though I think you're a terrific producer, I've always personally thought she could still be a reporter or anchor. I know she could. I just. But I
don't want to be.
I know you don't. But I'm just thinking she'd be terrific at anything she wanted to do. Okay, so let's talk about given some advice to our students, to a young person, and you've kind of already gave some indications, but you gotta have that internal love for what you're going to be doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you have to have passion for this job. I think that you need some grit and some resiliency to go along with it, because it is tough. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's not like, hey, my job is super easy and I come in and I write some stuff and I leave. My job has gotten easier for me personally in some ways, that I'm not kind of like as panic stricken as, a rookie might be. But every day is slightly challenging. And if it's not challenging, it wouldn't be fun. Not to quote A League of Their Own, but if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? So that's kind of part of the fun of it, is that it's like nobody else can, not everyone is built for this business. So if you don't love sports broadcasting, or you don't love news, this isn't the job for you. And that's okay. I think that's part of what Western is about, is finding out what is a fit for you. Take a class in public relations, take more communications classes. There are other things you can do with your degree. We work with public information officers for different cities, for different counties, for police and fire stations all across, the area, colleges and it's not just public relations firms. There are other ways that you can use communications. If you love to write and you kind of like informing people, that is a great thing to go into. And knowing a little bit about at least how this industry works, that's a bonus. We love when it's a former journalist who gets a job as a public information officer for this agency or that agency, because they kind of get it. They know that we're on deadline. They understand how the business works. That can make you a great asset. But to come in and do news every day for, let me tell you, it's not 40 hours a week, day in and day out, and working holidays and weekends and everything. It's tough. It's not an easy thing. So you have to be gritty. You have to be resilient. You have to work really hard at it. And Western helped me with that. Not that I didn't kind of have that ambition and that drive a little bit myself, but grit is something you can practice. It's something that you can learn by sticking with things that are hard and sticking with them. And same thing with resiliency. It's about getting back up. You're going to fall down. I made mistakes. I lost my way a little bit. I don't have perfect shows. I always wish I did something different or better, but you get back up and you do it the next day. And that's the great thing about news, is you've got another show, or there's another half hour coming, or another, day, or another story to write. It never stops. You always get a chance to just pick your head up, dust yourself off, and, start all over again.
But as you said, there's just a limited number of people that can do it and do it well. And you're one of those people. And what I didn't say, which I meant to say early on the podcast, was you're also an Alumni Award winner from us. You received that award. I think that, what was that like, being back on campus and getting that award? Was it at all surreal?
That is the thing I'm like the most proud of in my entire career. That's the only award I've ever wanted to win. When I was part of that coverage when Prince died, we won an Emmy for that morning show the following day. Recently, we won a DuPont Columbia Award for our continuing coverage of George Floyd and the aftermath. Those are fantastic. They were group awards. I did not do them myself. I've never submitted for an Emmy for myself. It's not something I personally am interested in collecting. But that award from Western meant the world to me, to be honored at a place that I love so much, that I have wanted to give back to. And I just felt like it was also an important moment to show what a producer is, what I do for a living, to be a woman in this industry, and to be recognized and to show other women that it's possible to do that. Because like I said, I had no idea what a producer did. until I was halfway through my time at Western. So I just feel like representation matters too. And it was so cool. It was just the coolest thing. I've never been so nervous in my life as I was to give that speech. It was great. Thank you so much for that. I don't know if I ever even thanked you guys. I think I was so nervous and scared.
Oh, you did.
And that I forgot to tell you how absolutely grateful I am for it.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, you were a role model when you were a student, whether you were as intentional or not. You often came back and spoke to our classes. We had a December Zoom event, and you were one of the first persons I said, I'm going to ask Brittany Baumann, because Brittany always comes through. And you did. I mean, you said yes. And that's why I think when I asked you, I said, I've been waiting because, I didn't want to, I feel like I maybe overused my favors with you too much. And
no.
Never.
I literally just pulled this out of my drawer. Here's my award, my alumni. I just honestly wasn't planned. I just happened to have it.
That is
real
awesome.
Handy because I love it. I also have this was another one I'm super proud of. I don't know if this is still something you guys give out. I want to make a difference award in 2006, 2007 as well.
Really?
Yeah, I think it was a made up category. I think Sharon felt like I just didn't get an award because I never submit for anything. And I think she just made this up, but I love it.
Yeah, she did. I think she wanted to make an award for people that she felt, we're making a difference. I think that's Sharon Evans right there. I mean, that exactly shows what kind of a teacher she was. But I appreciate that you have always been helpful to our program. I know when we also did offered a session in the spring, which you and Mike Kirchhoff did some talking with some of our students about contract negotiations and what to expect, and that was so great. I mean, it's just so many different ways that you have given back, and I appreciate that so much because we're very proud of you. You are a great role model, and that's why your big picture's up on the board.
How embarrassing.
Well,
it's great, but it's slightly embarrassing.
I know you reluctantly did that, but that is important. That's an important image. And as I was telling Mark Moses, as we've already talked about Mark several times, I had to put him by the restroom for a reason, because he in our conversation, and when you watch the podcast, you'll get what we're talking about there. But I just want to thank you and say I'm very happy for your luck, and I'm glad Mr. joined the podcast today. Mr. Now you've gone quiet on us.
Yeah, he got his treat, so he's done with me now. He doesn't need anything else. He's good.
Okay. Well, we hope to see you again in Macomb sometime soon, Brittany.
Thank you. If not, I know how to use Zoom now. I was taught. I've got it down. I would be happy to Zoom in anytime you need me as well.
Okay, absolutely. Well, thanks again for tuning in, and make sure to join us again next week, and we'll have another guest on our podcast. If you have somebody that you want to recommend, just send me an email. I'd be happy to have them on the show. We want to hear from our alums, and we hope that you continue and listen to the podcast, and really appreciate everyone's support. So until next week, stay safe, take care, and God bless.